everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make some oat flour chocolate scones or scones. These are going to be the North American type of scone, which are wedge shaped or triangular, and they're made with a combination of oat flour and plain flour. Now I saw the recipe on the Quaker Canada website, but there were some inaccuracies in that recipe, and everything was given in cups, which is not a particularly accurate way of doing things. So I've had to recalculate everything and eliminate a couple of things which are slightly in error to come up with this recipe, but it's based on that one basically. So I'll start off by preheating my oven to 180 degrees Celsius, that's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, and I've lined a baking tray with some parchment paper. So with that done, I'll go on to the ingredients. And for the ingredients, I have 125 grams of oat flour. Now, what I did was, I don't have oat flour and it's very expensive here. A pound of oat flour, 450 grams, is selling in my supermarket for £4, which is ridiculous. So I've taken rolled oats, 125 grams of rolled oats, and I've processed them finely for about 5 minutes in my processor basically. So it's quite fine. And that works out at about 1¼ cups of rolled oats. Then I have 75 grams, which is a ½ cup based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 1 medium egg, which would be large in the USA, and 1 medium egg yolk, again large in the USA. I also have the white from that medium egg, which we will use later. I have 113 grams, which is 1 stick of ice cold butter. I have 60 millilitres, 1/4 cup of milk, 5 millilitres, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 25 grams, 2 tablespoons of caster sugar, 12 grams, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, 1½ grams, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I have 100 grams, ½ cup of chocolate chips or mini chocolate chips, and I'm using 51% cocoa solids for mine. And then to go on top, I'm going to make a little chocolate ganache with 1/4 cup, 50 grams of chocolate chips, and 14 grams, 1 tablespoon of butter. So that's all the ingredients, and basically we just need to mix these together. We start off by putting the dry ingredients, which is the oat flour, the plain flour, the baking powder, the salt, and the sugar, into a bowl, and I'm just going to use a whisk to stir those around to get them combined a little bit. And then we need to add the butter into that and rub it in. Now for this I'm going to grate the butter with a cheese grater, and then I'm going to use a pastry cutter to cut it in, but you can do it in little cubes of butter and rub it between your fingers if you want to. But we want some butter still to be visible basically, or some chunks still to be visible once we've finished the rubbing in process. And with my butter shredded, I'm simply going to toss that around a little bit, just to get that coated. And then, as I said, I'm going to use a pastry cutter just to cut that in, but you can rub it between your fingers. or use a couple of knives. If you use a couple of knives and go like that, you can cut it in like that. So I'm just going to use my cutter and then I'm just going to give that a little bit of a rub. And I should say these are going to be a very light scone. The oat flour, because it has no gluten in it, will give a different texture to a scone which is made with all wheat flour basically. But I made them yesterday as a test and they're very light and very, very nice. So with my butter rubbed in, and I can still see little chunks, that's good enough like that. So then we need to add our wet ingredients. And to do that we need to mix them together. So I'm going to put my eggs, or egg yolk and egg, into a jug with the vanilla extract and the milk. I'm just going to whisk those together just to get them combined. And then I'm going to pour that into the bowl, and I'm going to mix it around until it's just about combined. There may be some loose pieces of flour. And if your mixture seems very wet, you can add a little more oat flour or a little more plain flour and that will be fine. But I think mine's probably good like that, and I'm going to put that onto a floured work surface like that, and I'm just going to sprinkle some flour over the top and pat it down a little bit like that. And then I'm going to put my chocolate chips on. And I'm going to fold it over and get those chips incorporated. And I've folded my dough over several times, keeping my hands floured, just to get the chocolate incorporated. I'm just going to put some more flour on the board, and then I'm going to flatten that out to a disc which is about 8 inches in diameter. Like that. And then I want to divide that into 8 pieces. So I'm just going to try to mark it a little bit. You don't have to be exact, of course. And then I'm going to cut that into the 8 pieces. And I'm going to transfer those pieces to my parchment lined baking sheet. And I'm going to make sure that there's a good gap between each of them. Like that. And then I'm going to take my egg white, which I have beaten slightly, and I'm just going to brush it over the top. And they are then ready to go into the oven. So I'm going to put them into the oven and I'm going to bake them for 20 minutes. And they should brown, become a golden brown colour on top and brown underneath as well. And at that stage I'll take them out of the oven and leave them on the tray on top of the stove or on a wire rack until they've cooled completely. Then I'll transfer them to a wire rack, and at that stage I'll come back and I will have melted my butter and my remaining chocolate together and stirred it into a smooth sort of ganache and let it cool a little bit, and that can then be drizzled on the top, but I'll show you drizzling that when I come back after these have baked. I baked the scones for 20 minutes and they baked up quite nicely, so I took them out and left them to cool down. They're still slightly warm, but I've transferred them to a wire rack and you can see they're baked underneath as well. Nice and light, as I said. So I have melted my extra chocolate with my butter and just stirred it until it's nice and smooth. And this is still warm, but I'm going to pipe some of it onto each scone. Now you could use a spoon or a fork to drizzle this on the scone, and you can do it any way you want basically. So I've just piped any old pattern on those, and I'm going to leave them for that chocolate to set up just a little bit, and once it's set up I'll come back and we'll have a taste of one. I've let the oat flour and chocolate chip scones set up a little bit with that ganache on the top, and I've broken one open so that you can see the inside. They're nice and light in texture, and as I said earlier, because of the oat flour, the lack of gluten does make them a different texture to a normal scone, but very nice and light. So I'll have a taste of this one. It has that sort of almost melt in the mouth type texture, has a nice nutty flavour almost from the the oats, and then the chocolate as well, of course, gives the flavour. So these are actually quite simple to make, and they're different to your normal scones. Be perfect for those who like maybe some oatmeal at breakfast. This would be a nice alternative. Or you could have them for lunch. You could have them with a cup of tea as well. So that's going to be it for this recipe, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.